You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
City to city, coast to coast, around the world, 21.5 podcast.
Yeah.
For professional pilots by two
semi-professional pilots.
Somewhat professional. Not a professional appearance today, I would say.
No.
Of, scraggly beards. Haven't flown much. It's okay.
Welcome back, everybody.
Max, we got some listener feedback. He said, we need some positive stuff. We're tired of hearing about furloughs and job hunting. And so we got a few good stories. We collected a ton of listener stories from several months ago, and we've got a treasure trove of them. So
yes, a real cornucopia of stories.
So stick around for the second half of the episode. We'll share lots of good stories from folks, but I thought maybe it would be good for us to start off with a couple stories of our own. You know, when we're getting through some of these tough times right now in the industry, and you and I have both now seen 3 black swan events in our aviation career in the last 15, 20 years. I've found it's helpful to remember why we do this and talk about a little bit about the motivation. I know you have a good story. You almost walked away from flying.
Yeah. No, like Dylan said, we were talking the other day just on the phone and trying to remember. Sometimes it's hard to remember why you do this job because sometimes it can be so crappy. Whether you're starting a new job that's seniority based and you're sitting on a crash pad in Newark, which we'll hear from someone later who's doing just that, but there's also the high points. You know, I've scuba dived and skied more times than I can count at work and seen some cool stuff and done some incredible things. And so I think sometimes when we're on the backside of the curve and things are going down, like right now, it's important to look and remember why you do this. So that way you can continue to push on through the crummy parts. And because you never really have to think about that when things are going great, like they were 6 months ago. You know, it's very apparent why we do this job. So I was at the regional airline and the newness had worn off of flying the jet and traveling to some places I hadn't been and this and that. And I remember I was getting pretty down because I was commuting from Prescott and I had to go to Phoenix and then commute up to Chicago. And it was miserable. So I had this great idea that I was going to change careers and become an attorney. So I started studying the LSAT from a LSAT self-study book, and I would do it on my commute flights up and to work and sometimes on my long sits in the O'Hare airport or whatever. And I took the LSAT, got accepted to law school, and came time to quit flying and go to law school. And I remember when it all sounded great until that actual moment where I was like, this is real now. Like I have to do this. And I remembered and I couldn't do it. And so I withdrew from law school and I said, okay, I'm going to pivot my flying career and figure out something different to do. And so that's when I went to Scottsdale, got into business aviation and pounded the pavement there with resume and talked to people and got a job flying for a professional golfer. And, you know, the rest was history. So I came very close to leaving and I'm so glad that I never did because I think sitting in an office all day arguing as an attorney would have killed me.
Right?
So yeah. Right.
Can't imagine you doing that.
No. So we've been, like you said, this is our 3rd Black Swan events. Each one has affected us but here we are. And of course we're not the only ones. A lot of people persevere and get through this, but for those of you that are getting down on yourselves or getting down on this career or this business, it can be crap sometimes. And right now it's more apparent than ever, but
yeah. And there's going to be more black swan events.
Yeah. And it will happen again. You know, we go back to the same thing we said before. It goes up, it goes down. Hard Landing's the book, blah, blah, blah. But it's a pretty good gig overall. If you kind of take the average of the ups and downs over the course of a career, it's a good gig. We're just saying sometimes take a step back, remember why you do this and figure out your next move.
Absolutely. And I've told a similar story about right before my wedding, I got laid off. I got laid off right before our first son was born. So inopportune times.
Have you ever revealed on this podcast about your driver ed days?
I used to teach driver's ed for this. Like,
it was the greatest thing ever.
School. Oh man.
It was so fun for me.
It highlights my point. I was getting burned out on aviation because I was also flying at the regionals. And I think that is the one job that can really just suck the life out of you. Once you have a life and other things established and you're gone all the time, that job really sucks the fun of aviation out of you, at least for me. But what was cool was taking that break, working other jobs really made me appreciate the industry as a whole. And so it was almost like a little recharge. So there might be folks that are listening that may lose their job and have to actually go into a different sector for a little while. And while that might not be what you want to do, it might kind of reignite your passion to get back into it.
I've never actually had a break from flying, but I'm sure that gives you some really good perspective of what working, quote unquote, a real job is like.
Remember why you got into it in the first place. And these times are going to continue to arrive. Unfortunately, every decade or so, we seem to get one. So it's just the nature of the beast. But speaking of changing and pivoting, you're joining us remotely today because you're in the middle of another career pivot, your 15th pivot. You want to talk a little bit about what you're up to?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sitting currently in the Residence Inn in Orlando, Florida, in another long-term training event at Flight Safety, which I never thought I would say.
Well, August in Orlando is just a special time. So
yeah, it's just great. A nice thunderstorm every afternoon. It's just humid, hot.
So wait a minute. Hold on. Airlines don't train at Flight Safety. So
yeah,
what's going on?
Yeah, I made a bit of a pivot by choice, fortunately, in my situation. The airline I always refer to that I work for, I'm sure everyone's figured it out by now. I work at Southwest Airlines, and them, like every other airline, needs to thin the workforce a little bit. So they offered this extended time off program. Mm-hmm. And knowing where my seniority sits and the risk that lies ahead, there's been no announcements obviously there, but who knows what's going to happen past into next year and at any time, really. It's just things are crazy. So through my network, like our friend James always talks about, and keeping that network alive, I became aware of a good corporate job for a guy that was buying an airplane, his first airplane, and wanted somebody to manage the flight department and this and that, and wanted somebody that had experience doing that. And it's in Scottsdale, and it's right down the street from my house and the whole thing. And so that opportunity presented itself kind of at the same time this extended time off opportunity at Southwest was coming to be. And so I said, look, if I have an opportunity to do something different and do my part to potentially to reduce costs at the airline and maybe save one of my coworkers' jobs, I felt like I had the obligation to do that and take advantage of it. And honestly, it works out better for me than sitting at the bottom of the seniority list while this storm rolls through of obviously risk of losing your job, but also the quality of life because you're not moving. Only one way to move right now, and that's in the wrong direction. So I ended up taking that job, taking the leave, and there's this thing that at Southwest, everyone refers to it as drinking the Kool-Aid and this and that, and you get there at initial training, and everybody is so nice and so helpful, and like it gives you their cell phone, call anytime if you ever need help. Here's my office, and you kind of are waiting for it to wear off and waiting for it to stop. And after a while, you finally realize this is actually how it is here. Like everyone is really on the same team and very helpful and really likes working here and is a unified workforce and all of this. And so you get immersed in that long enough and you kind of become part of it. And so that being said, working there actually means a lot to me now, and that company and the way that they do things, and we all are in it together there, whether from the ramp guys to the customer service people to the pilots and flight attendants and everybody. And so, I had an opportunity to try and do my part, and so I did, and it works out, almost better, I think, quality of life wise than that too. I'm not trying to say that I'm a saint here. It works out pretty good for me too. And it's fun. I love corporate flying. I love Part 91. Going to be flying a Cessna product, which I've never done, but it's going to be really cool. You can do a lot of things with those straight wing citations that you can't do in a lot of other airplanes. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm in Orlando, finishing up next week, and I'll be home.
Welcome back. We welcome you back with open arms.
Thank you.
Back into the good side.
Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting that you mentioned that about Southwest, because we have another friend that is there, and he took a leave, and he was explaining to me, he said, look, I calculated it, and we can afford to take a leave for a few months, and we could potentially be saving somebody's job. So we're going to do it. Not because he didn't want to work, but because they were trying to help somebody else. And I think that is the one thing that in these leaves that sometimes can be overlooked, is that this is really, you guys are all kind of pulling together to help somebody else out. So that is cool.
Yeah. Hopefully it works and nobody has to forcibly take time off. But like they've said, this is the worst. This makes 9/11 look like a bump in the road. So this is the worst it's ever been. And while Southwest has never furloughed, they've been very upfront to say, that doesn't mean that we won't now, because not as a scare tactic, but this is the worst we've ever seen, the biggest drop off of demand ever. I mean, they're a well-run, they have a lot of cash and everything else, but they're not immune. So
yeah, I mean, if no one wants to buy a ticket, then
you can't fly around empty airplanes forever. So,
well, okay. Well, so now that you're back in business aviation, I wanted to bring something to you that I saw on the message boards the other day. I thought was a really interesting conversation. This was not directed right to us. I just stole this off of one of the pilot groups, but I thought it was a good conversation to have. And it said, basically, he is the manager of a single aircraft, single pilot flight department, Part 91. He said, the aircraft owner has decided he wants me to visit on site each day while any maintenance is being performed on the airplane to ensure work is progressing as expected. This includes maintenance done outside of home base. And he says, I'm a firm believer in following up and staying involved in the process to ensure timely completion, regular phone call check-ins, etc. But he goes, to me, daily personal checkups on the mechanics implies distrust to them and is a waste of time and company money. And then he goes on to mention leverage has obviously changed in the last year. A year ago, I might have been able to put my foot down more, but now, maybe right now, I can't. So he was just curious what people's thoughts were on visiting every single day.
Yeah, it's tough when the owner starts to drive in your lane. Your job is to oversee those things, and when they're trying to tell you to do things like that, and necessarily with expertise they don't have, that can be an uphill battle. And I've dealt with that before a bunch of times, because I had a kind of an overzealous owner sometimes that would do that. And so, as the department manager, you're a steward of his money. And like I used to tell him, I said, there's only one reason everybody doesn't have one of these private jets. It's only one thing, right, Dylan?
Right.
Just that one minor detail.
One little detail.
And it's the cost. And so as a corporate pilot, and especially as a manager, that's your number one enemy, is the cost. If the cost of running that department exceeds the benefit, that's it. And so that being said, you have to be a responsible steward of the owner's money. And so the best way to put it to him is to be like, listen, I understand what you're saying, and providing oversight when maintenance is done is a great idea, and I'm on board 100%. That being said, there's a limit there on several different fronts. One is I don't want to waste your money and drive the cost up of maintaining the airplane by needlessly traveling and doing things like that, when I feel like I can provide proper oversight remotely.
Yeah, he said this includes maintenance done outside.
Yeah, outside of the home base. And so, but that being said, that oversight is important. And the Gulfstream flight department I managed, we were fortunate enough to have our own full-time mechanic. But when the airplane went for a big inspection to a shop, he went and he stayed in a hotel and had a rental car, and we paid for all his expenses, and he oversaw the maintenance. But there was definitely a cost benefit analysis done, and the money that we saved by that oversight far exceeded the money spent. But one big difference, he's a mechanic.
Yeah.
Right. And so sending a pilot to look over the shoulder of the mechanics that are doing work, I don't think that those guys at all mind when you come and check in. They realize it's your job, but every day I think gets to be a little excessive and can work against you. Don't you think?
So I'm just thinking, drawing on a couple of my experiences. The first big check that I oversaw, I would pop in, once a couple times a week. And yeah, it was more the scheduling and making sure things were on track than actually being like, oh, was that thing torqued to the correct? Like you said, I'm not a mechanic. So some of that stuff I can't double check. I would take the crew that was working on the plane out to lunch once a week or something, just like kind of trying to build a little rapport with them. But I think the interesting thing with this, I think there's more to the story that we don't know about this post.
Why is that?
That's my guess. Why would the owner of the airplane say this? What's the motivation for he or she, the owner, to say this?
No, I don't think so, dude. I think because a lot of times guys, after they've owned an airplane for a while, they start to think they know everything about airplanes. And while they do start to learn more, but that was the experience that I had previously with the guy I worked for, is that he would start to think he knew more than he actually knew. And that's where you have to say, listen, I appreciate the suggestion. Here's the deal. And while that's easy to say, I get it. And it's easier for some people than it is for other, depending on that person's personality and the personality they're dealing with. The guy I flew for had a very strong personality, but so do I. So it ended up balancing out and built kind of a mutual respect of, he knew when I pushed back, like it was for a reason, whether it was on a safety thing or maintenance or whatever. But to sum it up, I think the thing is, oversight is important. Too much oversight can be a bad thing. And you just need to explain to the owner of the airplane why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of times, if you just explain it, it makes a lot more sense coming from the dude that actually knows, being yourself.
Yeah.
Or girl, dude or dudette.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, my only question is, in this particular example, I wonder if something happened through a lapse of oversight that maybe from a previous person or maybe this individual. What's the rest of the story to this? And that I think would really change the way you'd approach it. So, for example, the last heavy check they were in, they were a month late, and there for an extra month, and maybe the guy or girl wasn't in there checking on the maintenance status enough.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean?
And what? So, as a pilot, the purpose of you providing oversight is not, like you said, to make sure they're torquing things so the proper and that the torque wrench was calibrated in time and everything else. Your job is so they know that somebody's watching. Whether that's how many guys, I mean, you can tell obvious things. How many guys are working on your airplane? If there's corrosion or there's something like that, like I would usually say, I want someone to put eyes on it. Normally that would be our mechanic, but sometimes it would be me too. Or the same with our mechanic working at home. He had to know that I was watching too and making sure that he wasn't taking the easier route for his own benefit versus what was best for the operation. So basic oversight. You're not, not putting gloves on and getting in there.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, where you explain the correct way of oversight. But I would take it a step further and ask the principal, can you tell me what the fears that you have or the concerns that you have and what your rationale is to get to this place? Maybe you're inheriting a new job, and the last guy or girl didn't do the correct thing. So
yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah. So like I said, we just stole this from online, but I thought it'd be good to talk about. So curious what other folks have to say about this. If you've had a similar experience or had to push back, or maybe you do find that it's better for one of the pilots to be there all the time. I think especially this conversation applies to an operation without full-time mechanics.
Yeah, for sure.
Just pilots. So shoot us an email. It's info@215podcast.com. Let us know if you have anything to say about that. Well, shifting gears, Max, we've been cranking out these newsletters every once in a while. I'm just about to send out volume number 3 here in a couple of days. Wanted to give everyone a chance to subscribe before I sent it out. If you just go to our website, 215podcast.com, you can find the sign-up link. I think it actually just pops up. Shoot your email in. We'll never spam you. We're not selling your information, but we'll just get you on our list and we send that out. I just wrote an article on something that's might be relevant to a lot of pilots coming up, especially, anyone that's looking at a possible layoff or furlough where you might have to reduce your expenses. The article is on something called a zero-based budget, but it's a kind of a different way at looking at your personal finances and helping folks get control of their money, especially in a time when you might be looking at a large reduction in income. So if you've heard of the Dave Ramsey method, that is a zero-based budget. There's other ways that I talk about, apps and all sorts of cool stuff. My wife and I have been doing it for about 5 years, and it's been really an incredible way to transform our finances and help us get control when, I mean, for a while there, especially after 2008 here in Phoenix, when things were up and down, our income was all over the place because I'd be like sitting on the couch for 2 months with nothing to do. And then that very lucrative driver's ed check would come in. And but anyways, so good info there. If you head to the website, you can subscribe there.
Yes. So, Dylan, that's all great information. But my favorite part of what's going to be included in the newsletter is Amos, one of our listeners' wives. She did some furlough flute sketches for some concepts and what the flute could be. And it's incredible. Like, the flute hiding in the grass by the taxiway light, like peering around the corner. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen. I died laughing when I saw that. It's hilarious.
It's really good. It was
really good. Yeah. And the Warren horns in there and just more animations of the flute. It's the greatest thing ever. So if only for that, if you're independently wealthy and you never need to learn about the zero-based budget, you still need to subscribe to the newsletter just to see these sketches. It's the greatest thing ever. So thank you, Amos. Thank you, Amos's wife, for sending those in. We really appreciate it. And we will be reaching out to refine those in the future.
Speaking of contributions, we want to do a quick shout out to a few folks who took the time to make a donation to us via our website. You have to scroll all the way to the very bottom. Maybe I should make this link more prominent. There's a yellow donate button at the bottom, but had some very generous donations.
Yeah, it's incredible. I remember when you put that and I looked at our website and I go, who's going to donate? I thought it was the most ridiculous thing ever. And then all of a sudden, so that's awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Shout out to Jesse H., Phil D., and Ryan G. for all supporting the show. We sent you a little something in the mail. Hopefully you enjoy it. And we'd love to send you something in the mail too as well. If you just click that little button, help support us. And believe it or not, there are some costs for this show. Not wardrobe though, clearly, but some other costs.
The show is on a
zero-based
budget. Yes.
Budget. It was funny. One of the gentlemen who supported us, Ryan, we got an email from him. Turns out we went to school with him back at Embry-Riddle, and he sent an email and he said, I was flying with this guy last month. And he started talking about your podcast, and he said,
it's right here.
Riddle guys that were doing it. Yeah.
It's the best.
It's so funny.
That happened to one of our other friends too.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
They listened to it and they're like, oh, these guys, I thought I got away from them 15 years.
Oh no, it was Clint who's been on the show. Remember, he was flying and the guy was the FO, or the other FO was like, yeah, I would listen to this podcast. He's like, it's not the 21.5 show, is it?
Yeah. They recognize Clint's voice. Well, he's kind of unique guy. So
yeah, unique
spot. All right, let's look into the mailbag here, and then we'll get on with some stories. Go ahead.
This is hi. It's Charlie, the RJ sweater hater again. If you guys don't remember who that was, he was the one that wrote in about his hate for the sweaters. And then also the
commando sweater.
Yeah, the commando sweater. And then he also had the lanyard versus clip discussion, but he wore the lanyard in the winter when he had to wear the blazer, but then the clip in the summer. And we were kind of like, oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense.
Very complicated.
But anyway, he
alternated. Yeah.
But he did vehemently hate the RJ sweater setup. So I think from now on, he's just known as Charlie, the RJ sweater hater. But he wrote in and said he'd noticed a disturbing trend around the airports, the 4-stripe captain mask. I'm curious how you guys would weigh in, but I think I know the answer. Please see some examples below. And he puts a link to pilotmasks.com.
I'm opening this up. They did not sponsor us or anything. We just...
And then he goes, I can't believe it's almost long sleeve season again. I'm getting excited to sport some crispy sleeves in a couple of months. Best. Charlie, the RJ sweater hater. But so I didn't know this was a thing. So if you guys check that website, it's a black mask with captain stripes on it.
And they have a first officer one also.
Right. I mean, who is wearing those? Come on. I want any of our listeners to confess if you're wearing those and send a selfie. $15. It's in the price range of a.
Yeah. Well, you can get a 3-pack. But serious question, because I haven't been in the terminal in so long. What are most crews wearing? Does Southwest give you guys all Southwest masks?
They were issuing just blue ones, like 3 per employee, I think it was. But a lot of people wear, dude, you see guys with like face shields and with the American flag masks, which are pretty prevalent all over the place, just like the tie, not just Southwest guys, but everybody. And so search just the regular disposable masks. I don't know. I mean, I've been wearing the cloth mask, and I'll tell you what, the cloth mask does not last long in Orlando, Florida, because it's so humid. It just doesn't dry. I wore that thing for like a day. I'm like, this is gross. And so I went to the surgical masks.
Interesting. Well, pilotmask.com, you can check it out and then give your own opinion. Charlie, I would say we should call Ted, but I guarantee I know what Ted's going to do.
Yeah, no, that's going to be anticlimactic. But Charlie, thank you for bringing this to attention. We appreciate it.
Now, next email. This is very serious. It says, overall, a great podcast. This was a review we got on iTunes. Makes me laugh while informing, but normally I don't really notice or care about all the all-male wording in terms of aviation, since I've listened to it for over 25 years. But it sure would be nice if y'all could help the issue and change the, quote, guys in the left seat or guys on the line, guys, to people or gals. She says, haha, wouldn't that make everyone weird out? Maybe just something that helps listeners imagine that it could be a female in the seat. Thanks, MJ Riley.
And I thought that was well written, because I was not like offended. I was like, wow, she's totally right.
Yeah.
We are chauvinist jerks.
That's right. Well, so it's difficult to do, and I've been catching myself, because this review actually came in a few weeks ago. So as we've been doing stuff, I've been really trying to change the way that I word.
Yeah, she's totally right. I mean, we're guilty. So we promise to do better. Jay Riley, we promise.
Yeah, we're gonna do best. Probably not perfect though.
Yeah, give us a couple months. Let us know how we're doing.
Okay, we talked about the furlough flute featured pilot. That's going to come up next. Our first
Mike.
guest is Mike.
Guinea pig.
So, that's right. Let's give him a call now. We're kicking off that new segment we talked about last episode.
Yes.
We'll be featuring a pilot who is
who's come into contact with the flute.
The flute has emerged.
It's on the horizon.
And we've got we had a lot of laughs about the flute, but it is a serious time for so many pilots that are going to be furloughed here in the next few months. So I wanted to give a little platform, a little opportunity to folks that are getting the axe and maybe get them some exposure to potential employees. So on the program today, we have listener Mike. Welcome to the program, Mike.
Yeah, welcome, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
So, Mike, can you tell us first, why don't you start off with your current location?
Yeah, so I'm sitting in a crash pad in Newark, New Jersey.
God, it doesn't get better than that, ladies and gentlemen.
We've all been there. So, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your job status and what's going on?
Yeah, so right now, I think I'm the bottom 15% of our seniority list. So, of course, last week I got the big letter that most people got. So as of October 1st. Great. Yes, I'll be furloughed on October 1st. But I've been kind of accepting of that fate since late May, so it hasn't really come as a surprise to me. So
yeah, that's a good attitude.
Yeah, well, I've been in the industry. I mean, just the airlines past my IOE mid-December,
okay.
So brand spanking new. So
man, so you just got a taste.
Yeah, just got a taste of it.
Have you ever lost your job in aviation yet?
I have not. So first one.
We've both been there, and just got to take it as it comes. So tell us a little about what were you doing up until this point?
Yeah, so kind of been involved in all aspects of aviation. Started off my career as a line service tech at a FBO, and then went up to the charter sales department. So at 19 years old, I was quoting trips for King Airs and Nextants and going to NBAA events. And quit that job as my flying started to degrade. So I focused on my flying more. And then I went to do CFI, CFAA, and my MEI, and then I did the assistant chief flight instructor and chief flight instructor roles at some flight schools before coming to the airlines.
Cool.
That's a good background. So I'm going to put on my James O'Neill hat for a second and think about, so what's great is that you have some experience in business aviation already, and you can actually be attractive to making the jump into a different sector if that's what you're choosing to do. Mike, we've seen a ton of folks on a lot of the pilot message boards posting like, hey, I'm going to get furloughed from ExpressJet or whatever regional, and I have 1,700 hours and, 100 hours and then, blah, blah, blah. And like leading with that stuff, which is leading with your credentials in this market. It doesn't really make any sense. But if you can be somebody that's leading with like a problem that you can solve or a skill that you can bring, that's different. For you, for example, you could be like, hey, do you own your own hangar? Do you need help doing line service and other stuff?
Yeah, just a mix of skills that the average pilot doesn't have, I think.
For sure, yeah.
Do you have any post-furlough plans at this point, or what are you thinking?
So luckily, yes. Right now, back in May and June, I took our company leave. And in June, the flight school where I got my commercial add-on, they picked me up to do some side instructing, and they want to bring me on as the assistant chief come October 1st. And so they want to help it grow to a Part 141 school and add some more planes to the fleet. So I'm super grateful for that. But I'm still looking for the, maybe the 135 or the 121 cargo gig. But as of right now, I'm pretty happy that I do have something, and I'm super grateful for that. So
that's awesome.
That is probably the number one important lesson Max and I did not learn, which is don't let your CFI lapse.
Yeah, that's too much work, man.
Dude, I know. I got to go get it too now.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I do too.
I know. I've flown with a guy who's a DPE, and he kind of gave me the skinny, but I got it.
It's going to be terrible. Maybe we'll go to Mike's flight school. No.
I can still teach it.
All right, Mike. Well, we have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. We want to get to know you a little bit
just
more.
kind of to figure out what kind of a guy you are.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
Go ahead, Max.
Mike, do you wear long sleeves or short sleeves with your pilot uniform?
Oh, short sleeves.
Okay, good.
Lanyard or clip?
Lanyard for sure.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's 1 for, 1 against. I'm keeping track here, Max. Go ahead.
Do you ever use the phrase with you when checking in with center on the radio?
I do not.
Okay. That's 2 for,
all right.
1 against. All right. Go ahead.
Now, you have to be honest. Tell me about a time you've dropped the I'm a pilot line.
Ooh. There's so many.
With a female, preferably, if that's,
At the bartender, the whole thing.
Yeah. You got more. You're trying to sifting through all the stories.
Yeah,
I'm trying to identify them.
This is the most challenging interview you'll ever have. All right. Now, not you at the controls, but I want you to tell us about the worst landing you ever witnessed.
Oh man, we were we were coming into Newark one day, and the wind just kind of died off. It was like gusting to 20. Then all of a sudden, I don't know if it went calm or what, but we were right in the flare. And if you've ever been to Newark, off of, was it 22 left, you got the high speeds at the end, but before the high speeds, you have a 90-degree taxiway. And we made that pretty easily. And I kind of look at the captain and I was like, I've never made golf on this side before. We just started dying laughing. So we had I think the captain even said, sorry about that. It was a rough one.
I love it.
Awesome.
So anyways, Mike, we really appreciate you coming on the show and just putting yourself out there a little bit. It sounds like you're a blast to fly for, despite the lanyard.
Yeah,
I think folks could look past that. But.
Hopefully, yeah. And it's a lot of good stuff there still. Yeah, so
absolutely. So I enjoy following you on Instagram, Mike. Can you give us your handle if people want to follow along with what you're up to?
Sure. So my last name is Healey, Healey, and there's a certain brand of shoes that kind of has that name. So my Instagram handle is Rolling in My Heelys.
That is perfect. Oh my gosh. Cool. And if people want to reach out to you non via Instagram to maybe get a hold of you and network a little bit, can they find you on LinkedIn? Do you have an email? What's the best way?
Yeah, I do have actually a brand new LinkedIn, thanks to James O'Neill and his team at Raven Careers. So you can reach me there or at my email. That's going to be Mike G, as in golf, and my last name at gmail.com.
Oh, look at this. I see you. I'm looking you up on LinkedIn and sending a connection right now. And you didn't go to Embry-Riddle. That's good.
That's a plus.
That's a good thing. Congratulations.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, Mike, thanks for taking the time to join us today. Put yourself out there. We really appreciate it. Good luck in the coming months. It is going to be crazy, but it sounds like you are well equipped out there and being proactive.
Nice pivot, Mike.
Yeah.
Nice pivot. We like it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
See ya.
All right. Well, thanks to Mike for being the first of our featured furlough.
Those are some tough questions. You know, how would you react if somebody asked you just rapid fire, long sleeve, short sleeve?
At a time.
About a time.
This is interview. It's basically free interview prep is the way I look at it. Incredible.
Yeah, that's
Huge value.
a lot of value.
So if anyone wants to get a hold of Mike and connect with him, we'll have his email.
What was his Instagram again?
Rolling on my Healey. It's pretty clever.
That is funny.
Pretty clever. All right, Max, before we launch into some of these stories, I wanted to talk about two of the worst things that can happen to you as a professional pilot.
Oh, yeah?
One, getting furloughed.
Or two, finding out you have a child in the Philippines.
No, you have some personal experience about that?
No, I'm just hypothetical.
Number two, losing your medical. Fortunately, you can buy insurance for one of those two things.
Or you can have your employer buy it for you.
Even better. Yeah. Our friends at Harvey Watt offer the largest selection of loss of medical insurance products on the market today. They insure over 75,000 professional pilots. So look, you can never buy furlough insurance, but you can buy loss of medical insurance. Visit harveywatt.com today. Check out all the coverages they provide. You can do it yourself. You can get it through your employer. Plans are portable. They even have life insurance.
Sleep easier at night knowing you're covered.
That's right. Sleep easier at night without that child in the Philippines waking you
Or
up.
Cabo. Who knows?
That's right. harveywatt.com. Check them out. We've got listener Matthew on the line today. He reached out to us online and said he's got a good story for us.
All right. I'm always up for a good story.
Welcome to the program, Matthew. What do you got for us?
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. So one of my favorite memories that happened to a, air quote, friend of mine. I'm a former Air Force guy. Flew the C-17 for 2 out of my 3 assignments. And one of my friends actually had this happen to him while he was a lieutenant. So as you may or may not know, some Air Force pilots, when they fly, depending on equipment, may or may not be carrying firearms.
Mm-hmm.
I guess got to dance around that because that particular piece is probably classified.
Could be squirt guns. No one knows.
Yeah, squirt gun. Let's call it that way. Anyway, so very first deployment, brand new lieutenant, and my buddy's a brand new lieutenant, and he's out there hacking the mish, flying out of Iraq, Afghanistan, and at this particular mission, he did happen to have the old a Beretta 9mm with him. There's not a really great way to carry a Beretta in a flight suit, especially as a mobility guy.
Right.
So occasionally the rules make you have it concealed, which is kind of funny because they're like, what is that Beretta-sized bump under your flight suit for this full-size pistol? So they're flying a mission into the sandbox and have your standard 100 Army dudes all full kit in the seat pallets in the C-17, and they land where they're going and they taxi in, and he's really got to hit the bathroom. And they've done a couple stops that day, and they don't always dump the lab only at the first stop and the last stop. So anyways, he runs downstairs, and the lab in the C-17 is right at the front of the cargo compartment. All these 100 Army guys with all their kit are basically just staring right at the lab door. And so he opens the lab, goes to unzip his flight suit. And of course, you don't want your flight suit to touch the ground. So you have to do what's called combat roll it. So that your sleeves and stuff aren't going all over the C-17 lab floor.
Okay.
And something happens, something slips. and the Beretta goes straight down the lav.
Oh,
right, like flips just perfectly, does the turn right down into the opening, straight into the tank, and he has to sheepishly go upstairs and go. At this point, I mean, the door's closed, nobody knows what's happened, but he had to go upstairs and tell the aircraft commander and the crew chief, like, "Hey, guys, I just dropped the gun on the toilet." I mean, these are very accountable items, and so he's brand new lieutenant. So the crew chief dutifully goes and finds him a plastic bag, and so, but the lab's not big enough so to do the recovery without opening the door. So in front of like 100 of our Army brethren, he has to take his arm in a trash bag down the lav, which is foolish at this point, hunt around and retrieve the dripping with blue juice M9 in front of a now slow clapping and laughing their faces off contingent of our Army brethren. That's awesome. And just as it just drips blue juice all there. And so they secure it in a more secure location than his holster, and then continue with their day. And he had to go back, of course, and then the ultimate thing is he had to turn it into the armory, and you don't just turn in a blue juice dripping M9 to the armory. Like any good lieutenant, he just asked for a cleaning kit and a toothbrush and disassembled it and cleaned it himself. So not a story about aviation per se, but one that brought smiles to a lot of faces other than his when we tell it.
You guys had to have given that guy a nickname, didn't you?
Yes, I did get permission to tell the story, but out of this person may still be on active duty and just wanted to save him the grief. So the time my buddy dropped his gun on the lav in the C-17 just brought some smiles.
Somebody, we need to be on guard now. Every time we're on the radio, I'm going to be listening for the call sign Blue Beretta.
That's funny.
Oh,
hey,
man.
Some of our listeners might be interested. When I was in initial training with some C-17 guys, and we were talking about, God, I don't remember what it's called, and I'll butcher it if I try, but where you guys would come in very steep and have the thrust reversers deployed in flight. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's an unclassified maneuver that's in one of our pubs. I know that. So basically it allows us to stay high above things that shoot at us and then very quickly descend. So of the thrust reversers, you can just put 2 in reverse, which will give you about a 10,000 foot per minute descent, or all 4. So you have 4 in reverse, 320 knots, and about 20,000 feet per minute. The thing shakes like a banshee while you're doing it.
I bet.
And it's very much like if you do it right and you're doing 320 and then you put in reverse and push over, it's very much got that like pinnacle of the roller coaster, of like that very first drop on a roller coaster. So when we do this, it's not just for fun. Like we have to measure it out and calculate all the descent gradients. Because the worst thing, the least tactical thing you can do in a
early.
is the least tactical maneuver is the go around, right?
Ooh,
like you're low and slow, and you're like, hey, look at me, I screwed it up, and I'm going to come back around again. So that is mitigated by pre-planning maneuvers like that. So, but then of course there's the problem if one of them doesn't stow, then you got a whole different ball game.
What kind of pitch angle? I mean, are you just looking straight at the ground almost, or what kind of pitch are we talking?
Depending on the speed, between 10 and 20 degrees nose low.
Wow.
I mean, you feel like you're hanging forward in the straps, but it's not. Well, I guess once you get used to it, it's not too crazy.
Is it just thrust reversers, or is there like speed brakes deployed as well?
No, it's just thrust reversers. You can just deploy the speed brakes as well, but let's just say 4 engines in reverse in midair is quite effective at losing altitude.
Yeah, what do you need? You're already at 20,000 feet per minute. Like, how much more do you need? You can't do it for more than 2 minutes anyways, right?
20,000 sounded outrageous. I thought maybe we'd just go for 30 or 40.
Yeah, no, go for 30. That's plenty. So yeah, once a side story to that. One time when I was a young lieutenant, I was still in the bunk when cruising into England. We were in like the high 20s, and my aircraft commander they were like, hey, they had some sort of slam dunk approach, and he's like, hey, let's see if we can make that. And so he put two of them in reverse while I was still in the bunk and fell out. That was like, luckily I was awake at the time and kind of stopped myself, but that wasn't fun at all.
Welcome to the Globemaster.
That's right.
Well, Matthew, we appreciate you taking the time to tell us the story. It's pretty good. The listener stories are always hit and miss, and
It's always good to have
really
a flying story that doesn't actually have to do with flying.
That's my favorite part. Yeah, my favorite kind. So,
Right.
Thank you for calling in. Stay safe out there.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, Dylan, Max. Love the show. Keep up the good work.
Thanks,
All right.
man. Thanks,
Hey,
Matthew.
see ya.
Yep.
Hello,
Hey, is this Mike?
it is. I was working at America West, and one day I get this trip with a fellow by the name of JD. And JD was the head of the check airmen at America West. And part of the backstory on him is the two of us apparently shared the same hangar in El Paso when I was in the Army, and he flew for El Paso El Paso Natural Gas. They had half the hangar, and my super secret Army aviation company, electronic warfare type, had the other half. So anyway, we're flying together, and we get to discussing backgrounds and find out that this is the case. And, automatically there's a little bit of a touchstone there. And he was the head of the check airmen, and he was kind of a character. So sometime during this month, I'm flying a month with him. And sometime during the month, we got an FAA inspector come aboard for an en route check, line check. And of course, JD turns around, makes him feel at home, make sure he's got a cup of coffee, all that business. And we get underway, and we're flying across the country, going to Chicago or somewhere from Phoenix. And I notice old JD's over there at the left side of the cockpit, and he's got his head turned way to the left, and he's kind of twisting around, reaching in his flight kit with his right hand and kind of hiding what he's doing. And when he sits back up and faces straight ahead, the FAA inspector's right there by his right ear, and covering his right ear is a hand-tooled leather cover that fits over his ear like a glove, and stamped on it is FAA bullshit protector.
No way.
If I'm lying, I'm dying. That FAA inspector started laughing. He says, JD, what am I going to do with you?
All right.
Oh, man. So when were you at America West, though?
I went to America West in the end of October of 90. By July of 91, I had 500 behind me. By the 1st of August, I had been furloughed and recalled with 4 under me. I spent another year there and was finally furloughed forever on August of 92. When I got hired at Morris in Salt Lake City, one of my co-pilots that I had taken out of the King Airs and trained him on the 737 at Air Berlin, I found out I was out of work and called up and says, "You looking for a job?" And I said, "Well, hell yes." Says, "Have you got a resume over here?" And I said, "Sure." So he went and found it, turned it into the chief pilot, and, I got an interview and got hired. It comes to mind after Southwest bought us on the first of the year in 1994. And, of course, there was a little bit of an attitude between the civilians and the military and the civilians, and I'll leave that lay. But anyway, things weren't going real swimmingly. So that was in the days when a captain, when a first officer checked out as captain at Southwest Airlines, the first thing they did was went and got themselves a permanent. Now, you think I'm kidding you, but they did. They went and got a permanent, and their hair was as curly as if they'd stuck their finger in a light socket. And I don't know what the hell that was about, but that's what they did. Oh, anyway, my buddy is flying with this hot rock who's in the left seat, and the hot rock hadn't been there very long when he made captain, because the company was expanding pretty good, so he'd been a single pilot Air Force type and made captain on this 737. So they're going from San Antonio to El Paso, and it's the captain's leg. So under their policies, the first officer would run the altitude selector. The captain would verify that he had set it properly while the first officer was reading it back to ATC. And that's all the first officer was doing besides talking on radio, squawking and talking. So they're flying off across there, and they get someplace out around Fort Stockton, and lead flight attendant comes up to the cockpit. And that was the days when they could come up and spend quite a bit of time if they wanted to. And the captain, being newly divorced after the second or third time, was steady on the hunt, if you get my drift. And the flight attendant came in the cockpit, and he immediately turns around much as he can in the seat, and he's talking up this little gal, and he's thinking he's going to do some good tonight. And ATC comes up, says, cleared pilot's discretion 240, flight level 240. So he reaches up. I mean, this captain reaches up, just, Mr. Cool, spins the altitude selector, misses it by 100 feet, has to recorrect it, kind of cussing under his breath. And my buddy's sitting there looking at him. He reads back 240 to the ATC, but he didn't set it like he's supposed to, and procedures are everything. So he figures, well, if the guy wants to set the altitude selector, I guess he will. So pretty soon they're driving along. Captain still turned around talking smack to this little girl sitting behind him. And ATC says, you're cleared pilot's discretion 12,000. So captain reaches up. This time he's pretty good. He spins that thing from 240 to 12 and hits it right on the money. He is Captain Cool. So my buddy, he doesn't care. He just reads back 12,000 feet to ATC, and they're still drilling along at 330. So pretty soon, ATC comes up and says, you're cleared to pilot's discretion's 8,000 feet. The guy reaches up and spins this thing down a little slower, gets it to hit on 8,000 feet, shoots flight attendant out of the cockpit, says, why haven't we started down? We're going to have to turn this thing and make circles or something in order to get it down. And I don't understand why we haven't got it down. And my buddy looks at him. He says, well, why don't you tell me? You're the one flying this thing, Hot Rock. He said the rest of the month went just a little better, and Mr. Hot Rock wasn't quite so hot no more. I'll tell you one more quick one. I took the airplane into Burbank and had to set an hour before I turned and went back to Oakland. So got time to go get a sandwich and all that business. Came out, the new airplane was coming in. We were waiting on it. Went out to the airplane. All the passengers got off. Of course, they deplaned across the ramp, and so does the crew. So everybody got off. First officer went to the cockpit. I went up to the cockpit. The flight attendants are in the back. Well, pretty soon, the flight attendant comes up. She says, hey, Captain, we got a box back here, and it doesn't belong to us, and we don't know if it belongs to the other crew. I said, oh, man. I right quick called ops, said, hey, get a hold of that other crew. Too late. They're already gone on the hotel van. No passengers looking for a box, nothing. I tell ops, all right, call the bomb squad. So the bomb squad comes out. We don't know what it is. Nondescript box, no ID, nothing on it. The flight attendants all get off. The first officer gets off. The bomb squad says, can you ride the brakes for us and let's take this thing across the airport to the bomb disposal location? I said, yeah, why not? So I ride the brakes. We get the thing over there. I go down on the ramp with the rest of the bomb squad crew, and the guy that's going to go up in the cabin goes up there with his hard card. He gets up in the back part of the aircraft, back of mid-wing, takes his hard card and slides underneath this thing in case there's any trip switches or anything under it, brings it outside, sets it on their x-ray machine. These three guys are standing around it looking, and boy, there's batteries and there's wires and there's all kinds of stuff in there. And none of them can figure out what it might be. And I didn't get a chance to look at it. They wouldn't let me over there close because I'm not authorized, So they set it in there in a little container with the concrete mounted around it, and they blew up a breast pump. No kidding, a breast pump. There couldn't have been a married man in the whole bunch.
Thank you for the stories, and we're gonna have to give you another call sometime. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. All right. Thanks guys.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
Dylan, Max.
What's happening?
What's up, man? How are you?
So, being a pilot that lived down in the Caribbean, I was fortunate to spend some time with guys that spent many, many years down there, especially when my
company was just starting. And of course, there'd be multiple late night evenings, all pilots there chain smoking and drinking beers and story time. It was just pretty much just constant story time, just grilling and everything like that. I think it was like 4 pilots, 2 mechanics to 1 airplane. And they had maybe a charter once every 3 or 4 days. It was really, really quiet back then. So they didn't really have a schedule, but at the same time, he's got all these pilots are like in their early to late 20s living in the Caribbean islands. So a lot of them are just crushing rum and going surfing and, tennis and whatever. And so one of the pilots is telling me this awesome story where they like woke up after a long night and they got a message from their dispatch office saying, you guys need to get to the airplane right now. We have a pop-up trip that we need to take from one of the islands to another, one of the more exclusive French ones that we had been flying into. And this island has a reputation for being a little difficult to get into. And so they scrambled, they got themselves together and took showers and everything and jumped into the plane, flew the islands to pick up passengers and the pilots are not in good shape. Like they're not having a good time at this. And they load on this older couple with must have been their grandkids, and they're all going out to the island together. And so flight's about 45, 50 minutes, and they get there, and the pilots, they'll listen to the weather going into this airport. And now this airport, again, is notorious for being rather difficult to get into. It requires special authorization to fly into. And the winds were very strong out of the northeast, and the pilots are kind of nervous about it because they've only really landed here maybe 10, 15 times at this point. And so they're still kind of learning the ropes here. And they fly the approach and they come over the hill and like they get thrown like all over the place and they slam the plane into the runway. They're like couple bounces for like a little cartwheeling for a second. Like it was not a good landing at all. And they're like super glad they landed. They're like back taxing. Both of them said their hands were shaking, and they come off the runway. And one of the pilots was like, I knew I needed a cigarette immediately the second we were done. Like this was so bad. And so like they pull in and they shut down, and the passengers are walking out of the airplane. It's a caravan, so like they're supposed to like walk out of the back, and they usually like don't meet up with the pilots. But like the older gentleman in the group was walking up to the cockpit, and he has some money in his hand. And so the pilot who flew in the approach is like, all right, sweet, you're gonna get a little tip here. And the guy comes up to him and says, it's like, I've been flying into this airport for over 40 years. I used to come here when it was just a goat field. And pilot's starting to get a little nervous. And the passenger goes, that was the best landing I've seen in 40 years that I've been flying into this airport. And while he's saying that, he like reaches out and his hand's shaking. He just puts some money into my buddy's pocket, and it's a $1 bill.
Wow. I wonder what we got for a bad landing.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was the story. He's like, and so he gave me the $1 bill, but the thing was that the story, like that's where the story ends for me. But we spent months trying to figure out what does this dollar mean? Is he screwing with us? Is it supposed to be some sort of like life experience? Am I supposed to put it on my 401k?
Keep it as your first $1 you ever made.
Yeah. Frame it.
Hello?
Hi, is this Skip?
Yes, it is. Okay, so 26 years ago, I was in a crash in the Army, and I got beat up real bad. Army medevaced me out and to a trauma center. Then the Air Force air evac me up to D.C. to Walter Reed. I spent 11 months there getting rebuilt.
Oh, wow.
So I, got my medical back, had to take a demonstrated proficiency ride with the FAA, all that kind of stuff. I flew sometimes 6 nights a week. I flew night freight. I had to be at Wilmington, Delaware to load the freight, and they were newspapers, actually. I'd load them all up in the King Air 200, flying in single pilot, 8 hours a night, 6 nights a week. And I go down to out over the AR routes. So I go down to Wilmington, Dixon, go out AR1, and then come back in down. I'd go to Boca, unload the most of it at Boca, and then I had to go to Kissimmee, and then I came back empty from Kissimmee. Then I get back at like 3 in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning. Obviously, I was full of fuel. And I was too heavy going over the AR route, so I couldn't talk to ATC without going through many times, especially when it was warm out, without going through airliners or military guys above me. Well, so I'm out there one night, and I'm flying in shorts. I'm always in shorts if I don't have to be in pants, because I need freedom of movement. I can ride my right leg from the ankle, and I have no left leg. I take the prosthetic off, and I would rest my stump. If you know a King Air, there's a little window up on the left that you can actually open if you had to.
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah, all right. So I would set my stump up there and kind of kick back, just me and a thermos of coffee and a whole bunch of newspapers. Which to ratchet it down, I had to climb over the stack and get in there. And just one night, I'm going out across it about halfway. So I'm like 150 miles from shore. And I'm halfway on that route out of the Atlantic. And for whatever reason, my stump slipped off that little sill up there where that little window is. And in the King Air, there's a gang bar with all the electrical, the battery, the generators, everything. Has a gang bar. You can just hit it and shut it off to one. So my stump fell off, comes down. Before I even get to think about it, it hits that gang bar. Everything in a cockpit goes pitch black. I'm like, I thought I got hit by something. At first, I didn't know what happened. And it was a straight 200. So the straight 200 had the perfectly round exhaust tubes coming out, not the ones that kind of taper.
Yeah.
And I just see cones of light about, I don't know, it seemed like they're about 18 inches long, a cone of flame coming out the exhaust. And that's all the light I had. I was like, I was literally like, what the shit just happened? Like, I didn't see lightning that could have struck me. I didn't see anything. I'm looking around trying to figure out what just happened. And I'm all steam gauges, and autopods, of course, it's not working. And I'm like, I should have go brick first. And I started thinking, I look around, I'm like, oh, well, the engines are still, as long as those engines are still burning, I'm good. And then it literally seemed like it took me forever, which is probably several minutes. I have no electrical. Let me look at the electrical panel. That whole gang bar's off. And I start turning things back on. And how long it takes for gyros to spin up again and all that. And I get resequenced. And then I relay, hey, did I miss a call through a tanker that's up there or something? Because that's the only way I could talk to ATC was through somebody up there. And they're like, hey, we're wondering what happened to you. Oh, no, you had a little bad signal. Hit a bad spot or something. But I was always a lesson learned from then on for me. I never put it up there again. And always, like I tell people to get worried, as long as you got 2 engines out there burning, you're good to go. You are literally, you can fly with all this G-Wiz stuff, you're good to go. So, which may be with all these engines that have PMAs on and stuff, I assume they're still going to get their electrical signal, still going to fire, but I never forget that on the King Air.
It's funny because I've flown the King Air at night, and it's crazy. Like, if you look out there, you can see the glow coming from the exhaust. Yeah. It's really weird.
Yep. Okay. All right. So I was flying a trip, flew this one particular family quite often in the airframe that I flew for this fractional. I would get them a lot. And to this day, the slowest day of the week for air travel in the private aircraft world is Saturdays. Busiest being Thursday afternoon, and the slowest being Saturday. So if you got a trip on a Friday, there's a good chance you were going to sit for the weekend until Sunday. So I did the milk run, picked up the mom and dad in the Midwest, and then went and picked up the daughters at their different colleges, and then flew them down to Vero Beach. And it was late by the time we got done the milk run. I don't know how late it was, but it was late enough that the FBO was closed. So I don't know when it used to close back then, but it was 20-some years ago. And the ramp's super dark. And the company I worked for, we did not normally we take a taxi. There was no Uber or anything like that. Taxi, airport shuttle kind of thing. Or they get a limo for car service. We didn't get rental cars. Hardly ever. And we didn't have one there. When we landed, the principal said, if I'd known you guys were going to spend a weekend, well, I'd have had Cadillac here for you. In the front end of it, that's who they were. they had plenty of cars available. And I says, no, that's all right. No problem. We'll get our way to the hotel. It's hot and humid. We go to put the airplane away, all the covers on, et cetera. Well, we're like, we want to stop somewhere on the way to the hotel, so get something to eat, et cetera. So we're getting changed. It's pitch black on the road. I mean, you can't, it's like a well digger's ass. It is dark. You can't see anything out there. So we're getting changed. Next thing, come around the corner, we're like each in our own little separate, one's in front, one's on the side of the plane on the left side. And girls pop up that we just picked up and flew. And they're like, what, are you guys too good to hang out with us? I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Oh, you're too good to come over and like have a drink with us. We're like, sure, we'll be over. Never had this happen before. So we finished that. We're total, other than like our underwear, we're like undressed out there. We get dressed, we go hang out. And I'm not one that has like dressy clothes or anything. I go over there. I got my shorts on like always because I got out of my pilot uniform. And then go hang out with them. And we have a really good time. I happen to be a non-drinker, so I always got my wits about me. I'm always designated driver, etc. And the tiki bar used to be right there at the airfield, is where it started at. There's some place right in town there that we met like 6 or 8 of their girlfriends, I was in heaven, to say the least. Very well put together, highfalutin, silver spoon. Well, we get talking, who's the best at this, who's the best at that. They're talking. I'm kind of just there for the ride, not drinking. But they get into, what makes a man or something. They said, they start talking about people and their hand size. Like, I can, anybody you pick anybody in here, you pick anybody, I can beat any of them because they're talking about size of manhood and stuff. I can beat them all. Can you prove it? I'm like, I can absolutely prove it. So I said, close your eyes. And I had one of the twins on each side of me. And I took their hands. Now, I just have a strap undo my leg. I undid it. And I used to be a runner in the Army. And I still have a lot of calf muscle. And when you become an amputee or whatever, like on the leg, they take leftover calf muscle. They wrap it around the bottom of the stump to try to help all that. I still got all that muscle there. It's smaller, but still all there. I'm a biker, and I still bike all the time. And I let them, I'd take each of their hands, put it on my stump, my residual limb, and I start flexing it. And they just go like, it was like, what's that story with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan or whatever?
Oh, right.
Where she does in the freaking restaurant, in a crowded bar restaurant. And we're at this big, like, and I'm like, I'd say I was embarrassed, but I really wasn't, because I was in the Army, so you're not going to embarrass me by that. But, and everyone's looking at him like, the other girls, like, what is going on? I put my hands back on the table, and I'm like, I'm nuts. I have nothing to do with this. I envisioned repercussions coming down the road. Anyway, we had a great time the rest of the weekend. We milk run them back and drop them off, and we get the call. Like, all right, you got to bring the plane back to Columbus. I'm like, either we got unknown maintenance or something's up, not good, that we got to bring the plane back to Columbus. So get into Columbus, get hauled up to the chief pilot's office for that part fleet. And man, I got read the riot act big time. Fraternization. She was so mad. She's going to cancel her this and that. You can never do that again. So I was trying not to smile while it's all going on, but it was a pretty funny situation for me because I was, young 30s. Now these girls I'm talking about, they're now senior executive vice presidents, like second or third in line with this corporation that has their own flight department. They have, I think, 2 or 3 550s and a 450, something like that. It would never. And yeah, their director came from the place that I was flying for. It would never, if I never applied there, they would never even look at me. It would be.
Yeah, you're the reason they have a flight department now.
I'm
done with the fractional stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it, but I mean, they got great service.
Yeah, Howard.
Well, like all pilots, we appreciate a good story. So thanks to everybody that provided theirs, and keep them coming. Anybody that has a good story, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you and record it, because The story episodes are some of our most highly rated episodes. So keep them coming.
Yeah, I think folks are always looking for a little reason to remind them why they're in the business and a little feel good. So we can all use that right now. Thanks to Mike for calling in. His contact info is in the show notes. Of course, thanks to our friends at Harvey Watt for sponsoring the program. Max, did you see the video we posted the other day? 50,000 downloads.
That's huge. More than we ever thought we'd get. So thanks, everybody.
So that was a big accomplishment to us. Thanks to all of the listeners out there who have shared, like we heard before, you're flying with somebody and then you say, hey, there's something I enjoy, and passing that along to the next pilot. It's really appreciated. The word of the mouth is always my favorite way to hear about how people hear about the show. You can always connect with us on LinkedIn, 215 podcast there. We'll have the link in the show notes for that. And Instagram, you can connect with us there. It's at 215 podcast. We had the most incredible aviation license plate to date. I don't know if you saw it, since you're not a big social media-ist.
Talk to me.
It is of a Corvette, and the license plate says FAR 9113. Do you know what FAR 9113 is?
No.
Careless and reckless operator.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
So pretty good. So we've got a huge collection of them there. If you go on to the page, there's a little icon that says aviation license plates, and you can just click through them all.
That whole thing has gotten completely out of control.
It's unbelievable, and they just keep coming in. So if you see one, all you got to do is email it to us or tag us on Instagram and shoot it over. We'll feature you. We always try and put something funny in there, and I don't know, it's becoming an amazing following.
And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter.
That's right.
To see the furlough flute in person and other useful tidbits.
That's right. Merch store is always available at 215podcast.com. All right, that's going to do it. We will see all of you, men and women.
All right, guys and gals.
That's right. In a couple of
Catch you on the flip side.
But until then, just remember,
flexibility is the key to air power and making a good pivot when things go south.
That's right. That's right.
See ya.
See you guys. And girls.
And girls.
Rock on.